Welcome back to Someone You Need to Know. I'm your host, Rashanah Baldwin. Today's guest is someone who is building the future of Chicago's South Suburbs, Bo Kemp, CEO of the Southland Development Authority. SDA is the economic development agency for over 750,000 residents, 45 municipalities. Under Bo's leadership, SDA has reached over 10,000 businesses, directed millions in grant funding, invested in affordable housing, and launched targeted efforts to grow industries like food production and manufacturing. Bo has national experience working on opportunity zones with municipalities and investment funds across the country, and even partnering with Senator Cory Booker, who helped lead that legislation in Congress. We are thrilled to have him on today to talk about the future of Southland and how economic justice, home ownership, and innovation are taking shape in real time. Welcome to my podcast. How are you doing?
I'm glad to be here, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You are Bo Kemp, the CEO of the Southland Development Authority.
Correct.
So that acronym is SDA.
Correct.
You have an impressive resume from working with Cory Booker to building cities. I'm gonna say you're building cities across the country.
Yeah.
You're doing so much business development. I'm happy to have you on my podcast. Welcome again. Let's dive right in. I saw some of your national work that you've done with opportunity zones, but we want to talk about what's happening here in the state of Illinois. You work with some national leaders, as I just said, Senator Cory Booker, and help shape economic development strategies across the country, from New Orleans to Tampa. You're global, international. Yeah. I'm just going ahead and throw that out there. What brought you to Chicago, and what inspired you to take the helm of the Southland Development Authority?
So I've been first of all, thank you for having me. I've been very blessed in my life to have had a lot of different experiences, and I've lived in lots of different parts of the country. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, but went to elementary school in Inglewood, California, went to junior high school in DC, lived the longest in New York, and I moved from New York to Chicago. I moved largely because I love New York, but I got tired of spending all that money in New York. And I know the folks that are in the Chicago area feel that they pay a lot of taxes and things are very expensive. But relative to both the East and the West Coast, Chicago is a fantastic financial deal, both in terms of cost of living and taxes. And Chicago is one of the prettiest cities in the United States. I think it is very, very underrated city. And it always has, the whole Midwest has just good people. And so you mix kind of a beautiful city, good people. It's cheaper than either of the coast. And this is a place that makes a great deal of sense to live. So a lot of the work that I was doing at the time had me travel. So I traveled, 2 to 4 days a week. And Chicago is a very easy place to travel from because of all of the transportation assets that exist in this community. One of the things that people may not realize is that if you go west of the Appalachian Mountains, that go up the border, West Virginia, North Carolina, all the way up to New York, there is not a single city other than Chicago that you can live in without a car, because no other city west of the Appalachian Mountains has a fully built infrastructure, trains, networks, subways, buses, where you could live. So when you start thinking about cost of living, you start thinking about being in a beautiful place, a place that has a diverse workforce, you start thinking about, hey, I want to be able to live in the future where maybe I don't drive all the time. Maybe I'm worried about climate change and I need to be in a more climate safe area. Chicago really ticks off all of those boxes.
What led you to the SDA to take on the helm of the SDA?
So when, because of the work that I've done around economic development over the course of the last now 15 plus years, when I moved to Chicago, I was introduced to a variety of people, one of which was President Toni Preckwinkle, Cook County president. And I was asked to join her Council of Economic Advisors, which is the economic development group that is chaired by John Rogers of Ariel Capital, which tries to think holistically about how do we continue to expand economic development in Cook County. So I've served on that council for 7 or 8 years now. And that was my introduction to kind of Cook County and some of the civic leaders that are in the space. So when President Preckwinkle initiated the process of trying to evaluate the best practices around regional economic development, I served on a committee with her to do that work because of my background, having worked in places like Newark and other places around the country. And when that entity was formed, which is in November of 2019, she asked me to be the co-chair of the organization at that time, along with Diane Williams, who was formerly the head of the Safer Foundation. And so Diane Williams and I were both the co-chairs of the organization when the organization was founded. And then in the winter of 2021, I came on board full-time as the CEO. The intent was for me to just do this for a couple of years and we'd find someone, but I've really enjoyed the work and the opportunity, have a great team, and see a tremendous opportunity in the Southland area.
That shifts me to my next question. For those who are not familiar, and they're listening and watching, can you tell us more deeply about what the Southland Development Authority is and how does working alongside the South Suburban Land Bank work together?
Absolutely. So the Southland Development Authority is a 501c3. So we're a not-for-profit organization. We're an independent organization. So we're not a governmental entity, and we're nonpartisan. Our intent is to be a coordinating entity for all the regional economic development activity that takes place in the South Suburbs. So we work with all the cities, towns, and villages, and we coordinate activity because most of those individual cities, towns, and villages, on average, have less than 15,000 people. And as a result, they don't have enough tax revenue to actually hire a full-blown economic development team to support economic development in any one individual city. So it makes more sense for us to do this where we think regionally as opposed to the individual municipality. Although we are an independent not-for-profit, we have worked closely from the beginning and its inception with the South Suburban Land Bank, which is an intergovernmental agency, different from us, right? They actually get their powers to be able to actually take and resolve issues with land from the home rule that comes from the individual municipalities who are joined as their members. Because they are an intergovernmental agency, they are bound by all the types of rules and regulations that a government would be in terms of how they share information and the work that they do. And the relationship that we've developed initially was just a partnership around development projects, but it's now become a partnership in management where we actually work to help manage the organization. But in the long run, the intent is that the land bank has powers that allow us to take abandoned and underutilized property, put it back on the market so it's utilized. And the SDA, Southland Development Authority, is focused on how to grow property that the land bank might be able to work. So we do that work together.
That leads perfectly to the next question. I'm gonna break the third wall here. I was on a touring the Southland, South suburbs of Chicago, and saw some impressive work that SDA is doing on that tour. We're in National Homeownership Month. We've seen some South suburban communities like Riverdale, Harvey, Dolton, Chicago Heights that has long historical history that faces a lot of housing challenges. How are you all, SDA, helping to transform those under-resourced villages as well as the housing market to specifically reimagine home ownership and want people to invest in those villages to bring their businesses?
So thank you for attending the tour, because one of the things that is important is when we get to bring people physically out and they can see the properties that we've acquired and rebought, and redeveloped, it helps them understand what the possibility is. And we think that's true not only for people within the South Suburbs, but one of the reasons we started that tour in the city of Chicago and bussed people out is to have them understand how close the South Suburbs is relative to other suburban areas. And then we took them around, as you saw, to about 17 different cities, towns, and villages. So they got a sense of how diverse the space is. We really believe that the future of the state of Illinois is dependent to a substantial degree to the success of the South Suburbs. And that's because the state's really dependent on the Chicagoland region. And the Chicagoland region, and one of the things that makes it a destination for businesses, is its diversity in workforce. And by diversity, I mean in every respect, not just racial diversity, which is important, not just the gender diversity, but also in economic diversity. And one of the issues for cities that start to grow is they typically price people out of their neighborhoods. And it's important that we actually work to build as much affordable housing in the entire Chicagoland region as possible. But the north and the west suburbs are pretty well built. And it's very difficult to build affordable housing. The cheapest houses you can build in most of those areas, it's about $450,000, $500,000 house, which means somebody's got to save $80,000 to $100,000 to buy a house. And for a lot of regular people, that's not affordable, right? Even on the west sides and the south sides of Chicago, cheapest houses that you can build are typically about $350,000, $400,000, right? And so again, you're pricing a lot of people out of those neighborhoods. Whereas in the South Suburbs, and you went to one of those houses, we could build that house for $250,000, $300,000. And so many of the people that need to move into their house still need some sort of a subsidy and still need some support. But at that level, we can build more houses and we can work on the elements of subsidy. So what we've done on a tangible level is we've started a pilot program where we've bought abandoned properties in the communities that you just mentioned. We've paid those communities cash in order to buy the property. We've gone and raised the money, both the debt and the equity, to actually invest in rebuilding those homes. And we've started by renting those homes to people who will long-term become homeowners. Our intent as a not-for-profit is to foster home ownership. We want people who work in Harvey to live in Harvey. We want people who go to school in University Park to live in University Park. And so we are actively working throughout the entire of that region to get as many people as possible the opportunity to start by living there, even if they're renters, and to eventually become homeowners, so that their commute is better, because we know that that's better for a lot of communities. They actually add to the tax base, which is important. They add to the population, and population growth is one of the most important things to balance out the problems with the burden of taxes that are now being left for single family homes. And frankly, it's the thing that attracts both industrial and commercial businesses and retail providers and services to be in an area because of the population. So it solves many of those problems all at one time.
As you just mentioned home ownership, right? Can you share the specific programs that you all offer to help a homeowner purchase the home? One, and it's a part 1A, 1B. Hypothetically, I live in Riverdale or I live in Harvey and I see a vacant home. What do I do? Do I come to you all and say, hey, if you happen to own it, do I buy it from you all?
Mm-hmm. Good question. So first, programs. So we started a program in conjunction with a number of different entities, including Governor State, Ingalls Hospital, and LB Steel. That is an employer-assisted housing program. So, and the property that you saw was one that we are doing alongside with Ingalls Hospital. So they're trying to help get more of their own employers who already are working with them to buy property. So we get down payment assistance to support people to be able to buy property. So that's one of the things we've done. We've worked with a number of different organizations, all the way from the state at the IDA, which is the Illinois Housing Department, all the way to the other housing entities, including NHS, including Brick Partners and others, to ensure that we find ways to subsidize the cost of down payment, the cost of the mortgage itself, and ways for people to actually get support, even in sometimes rental assistance. Now, we have not yet worked closely with those who need subsidized housing, right? So we're not yet providing opportunities for people who have vouchers, but it is our intent to build housing that is both naturally occurring and affordable, right? So kind of market rate, but cheaper than a lot of other places, as well as property that may require a subsidy as well, and to put all these people on a path to ownership. And that means working with them around their credit, working with them around savings, working around with them with down payment assistance, working with them on mortgage assistance, and all the elements that are necessary for them to actually acquire and own a home.
So it's safe to say that you all are helping to make home ownership affordable through these different programs and options. A lot of folks watching and listening, especially millennials like myself, are starting to say home ownership is just not for me. It costs so much. Although the rents are about the same, this is so important because this month is National Home Ownership Month, and definitely want to strive to overshare that there are resources, programs, information out there to help homeowners. A lot of folks still think, my peers, you just have to buy the home and that's it, not understanding that DPA exists, down payment assistance, grants. So that's good to hear. So then the second part of that question, if I, driving around in one of the South suburbs and I see a property and it's owned by you all, what do I do?
What I do. So there's two parts to that question. And I'm going to answer the second question to come back to something that you just mentioned. So you can let the municipality know that this is an abandoned home. Sometimes the abandoned home is owned by the municipality. And if that's the case, we can work with the land bank directly with that municipality to actually take control of that property, actually rebid it out to someone who wants to buy and redevelop the property. That's one solution. Sometimes it's already owned by the land bank. And if it is, you can actually go to the land bank's website, the South Suburban Land Bank.com, and actually go and purchase that property yourself. You can put a bid to buy that property if you were interested in doing so. In many instances, the properties that you see are abandoned are not owned by the land bank nor by the municipality. They're owned by individual investors. And many of those investors don't even live in the area. And so finding them is one of the problems that many municipalities have. For some of these investors, there is some benefit sometimes for them owning dilapidated property because they get a tax benefit of owning it, even though they don't invest any money. Sometimes they do this in properties that are abandoned. Worst case, they do this in properties where people are living there. And in many cases, have been living there for 20 years, but the owner doesn't put any money in it, right? So the property that we brought you to in Harvey, you saw us redevelop that property. It was brand new. That property is going to become a rental and ultimately a property that's owned. On one side of that property was another abandoned version, right? Which is independently owned that we are looking to buy and going to redevelop. On the other side of that property was a property that's owned by owned by someone who lives in Florida. And the woman who lives there has lived there for 20 years, raised her child there, has never had the chance to own that property. And the owner of that property refuses to fix the roof, refuses to fix the heater, refuses to do a lot of the core work that's important. Now, that property has the benefit of someone who's lived there long term. So she cares enough about it to keep it at least working enough because she lives there. But the truth is, if she were to move and someone else were to move in, given its condition, it's easy for that property to fall in disrepair and become abandoned just like that. And so part of what we're looking to do is, to your point, if you see a property and it's abandoned, notify your municipality. You can also notify directly the land bank. Especially if it's run down or there's activity that doesn't look right, or it's a health hazard, all of which could be true. Sometimes we have to leverage the land bank's power to take that property from an owner who's not keeping it up to certification. And that's what the land
Are
bank
you
has
all
the ability
taking
to do.
property? So go deeper into that so we could be very clear. So when you say unusual activity, are you saying open, abandoned, causing a hazard to the neighborhood?
Those types of properties are exactly the ones you want to target.
Yeah.
And the story that I was telling you about the owner who doesn't live in the area is an important focus here, right? Because what you'll find in many cases is they do just enough to stay legally appropriate, but not enough to make it really a livable place for somebody. And they take advantage of the fact that people need a place to live and they need an affordable place to live. And there are not enough affordable places in the area. So people will live in a house that's got a leaky roof and has been leaking for 10 years because the roof hasn't caved in, but they still live there. People will live in a house that have water in the basement. People will live in a house that doesn't have the appropriate investment in its, HVAC and heating because it's cheaper than all the other places they can find, or it may be convenient. We don't have the power to do anything in those instances where people are maintaining the base level of certifications and taxes. But if they are not keeping their properties up to par, and or they are not paying their taxes, and they are in arrears, the land bank has the capacity to actually take those properties and actually get them back in the hands of somebody who will make an investment. And the property that you visited is a property that falls into that category where we bought it, dug it out, redid it, and are now putting it back on the market. That's really important. We've had over 200 properties in the last 5 years we've been able to do that with. And each property actually has a positive impact on the entire neighborhood. Just redoing one property that's blighted can actually increase the value of homeowners around that property by as much as 8%. So this is an important part of making what are not functioning markets in many cases more functioning by making sure that we take abandoned property, get it back into the homeowners that are going to take care of it. I want to come back to something that you said that I think is really important about home ownership.
Mm-hmm.
There's a debate about whether you should, any one of us, should we own a home or should we just rent a home? And that's a mathematical debate. And there are pluses and minuses to both.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that is not a debatable point, the way that wealth has been generated in this country since its founding and the way that the tax code is written favors those people who own land and own property, dramatically so, right? So if you want to build wealth in this country, owning real estate is a critical component. Now, there's a separate question. Do I have to live in the property that I own? Not necessarily, right? So as a millennial, you may choose to rent a property and live in one place, but you may decide to invest and buy a property that you rent to others in another location. So what I'm not saying is that you have to own your home in order to build wealth. I'm saying you need to own real estate to build wealth, but it doesn't have to be the home that you live in. You can separate those two things. And I think a lot of times people they don't think about it that way, right? They think that it's got to be the home that I'm going to live in. And so what they do is they restrict their ability to buy a home to the place that meets every specification that they have today and what they think they're going to have in the future. Because in their mind, they're thinking, well, this is a 20-year investment. So if I'm going to grow and have a family and this and that, I need to make sure that this home is the place I want to stay for 20 years. But you can rent the place that you live today. You could buy the home that you may never live in, but it's a rental property for you. And that property helps to build you wealth, even though you don't live in that property.
Can you say it loud enough for the people in the back? Because that was
right.
eloquently said. Yeah, I mean, I had a few of your counterparts, colleagues in the same space, whether it's NHS Chicago on this podcast, whether it was, some of the developers like Bonita Harris from City of Chicago, who all are talking in the same language, creating that generational wealth, creating the Black wealth amount of what we owe is zero. And how do we create wealth for ourselves? And it starts with owning real estate. And, I definitely want to continue to overemphasize that there are ways to become a homeowner affordably. There are
Absolutely.
there is assistance, there is programs. You have to be willing to do the research. This is off the topic of questions, but still on the topic of what we're talking about, right? And I know you watched the news and seen the lady who had over 800 properties, land, both. And how is that possible? One, two, is there anything that the CDA as well as the land bank or entities as such can do to hold these individuals, these investors accountable? Is there any moratorium that maybe your organization says, like, if you could only buy so many from us before you have to turn them into homeowners, or if you buy these many, it has to be what's your purpose, what's your goal to
Yeah,
stop you said, I know you said not in you I said you think you said not in the area of when these investors live, they don't live in the area. I was like, how about they don't even live in the state? They don't live in the state.
so
They
when I
live in
meant to not in the area, I meant most of them live in Arizona and Florida, right?
yeah.
But this is an issue that,
Mm-hmm.
to be clear, is a nationwide issue.
Yeah.
So if you live in Cleveland or you live in New York or Baltimore, the same thing is happening. There's a small subset of people in communities that are actually buying property, particularly in low and moderate income neighborhoods, right, as an investment property. And they're putting the base level of amount of money that's necessary to get them certified. They're renting those properties out as aggressively as they can, and they're investing as little as necessary to keep those properties up and going for as long as possible. And can you do something to stop them? You can do some things. It's not easy. I'll tell a story outside of the Southland. I worked with another national leader, a woman named Karen Freeman Wilson, who is phenomenal mayor of Gary, Indiana. She now runs the Chicago Urban League. She was the president of the National Cities League of Cities. She's done, she was attorney general for the state. She's done a lot of things. But in that role with her, we had 2 or 3 investors who owned so much property that they had bought through tax sale in the city of Gary that their unwillingness to pay their tax bill had an actual economic impact on the entirety of the population. They owned, and I want to get this right, but I'm going to guess at a number. Call it 1,000 homes, right? Between a couple of them. And they basically every year would petition and argue that the tax bill that was given to them was wrong and that needed to be reassessed. And they refused to pay the taxes on any one property until the tax was resolved for all 1,000 properties. And there weren't enough people in Lake County to actually go through 1,000 properties and reassess them to combat the tax, disparity between what they wanted to pay and what they thought was due to them. And so as a result, by the time they would go through the process in 1 year of debating the taxes for their 1,000 properties, the year would be up, they get a new tax bill, and they'd start the whole process over again. And they did that for, at least I am aware, for at least 15 years.
Wow.
And so they never paid taxes. And of course, what that meant is that all the people who were paying taxes were bearing the burden of them not paying taxes. And in communities that are usually low and moderate income, one thing that people don't get typically, it's not intuitive, but in many Black and brown communities, people actually own their homes outright. They don't have a mortgage. And what that means, and the reason they don't have a mortgage is their parents or their grandparents immigrated or migrated here from the South, bought that property in the 50s and 60s, lived in there for 30 years, paid it off, passed away, gave it to a kid. Their kids now live there. And what that means is if I don't have a mortgage, there isn't like every month, like a little bit of money that's being put aside from your check to pay your taxes. You just get a tax bill, right? Sometimes once a year, sometimes twice a year. And when that tax bill fluctuates highly, you can't anticipate it. All of a sudden, you thought you were going to get a $1,000 tax bill. It comes back at $3,000. I don't have $3,000. So what do? People just don't pay, right? They just stop paying because it's like, well, I only thought I was going to have a $1,000 bill. It came back at $3,000. I can't afford $3,000, so I'm just not going to pay. But it has a rippling effect on everybody else because as those people can't pay, right, it goes down. Now, the tax change impacts everyone, right? Not just the people who bought a house and have paid off their mortgage, but the people who bought a house and have a mortgage. The difference is if I have a mortgage and I'm paying every month, if I miss 1 month or 2 months, I still have in escrow, right? Part of the money that I'm required to pay to the city and to the state for my property taxes. But if I don't have a mortgage, it's just a one-time bill. So if in that one moment I lose my job, there's an economic decline, there's an emergency, the tax bill goes up too much and I don't pay, the government loses 100% of their money, not just a portion of the money. And that has a rippling impact, particularly in low and moderate income neighborhoods. Most of the people that own their homes outright in low and moderate neighborhoods are also older. They've lived there for 30, 40, 50 years, right? They have fixed incomes. So when you change the tax impact in their neighborhood, if I'm getting Social Security and I'm only getting $1,500 a month, and I expect to pay $800 in taxes a year, and you raise my taxes from 800 to 1,200, that's real money for me because I only have $1,500 a month for all of my expenses, food, medical, whatever it may be. And so you have a double whammy sometimes in these low and moderate income neighborhoods where they have older population that's on a fixed income. They've been in that house for 30 or 40 years. And as a result of being in that house for so long, they don't have an escrow or portion of their money that's set aside. And then there's the third whammy. Because they've been in those houses so long, there's actually no market comparables for a bank to lend against because people don't sell their homes very often. They may gift their home to a child or something like that, but they don't sell them. And so even if I want to repair my roof, I can't get a second mortgage because there aren't enough comparables, sales that have already taken place in the neighborhood to use as a basis to evaluate what my property is worth, to get a second loan, to fix the roof, to fix the foundation of the basement. And so that means those people end up keeping that home. They put as little into the home as they can afford to. And that home has deteriorating kind of infrastructure over time that is, exacerbated by the fact that they can't find any other source of income to help clean it up. And I know I probably went a little long in that.
No, this is a follow-up question. And this conversation is really spot on. This is National Homeownership Month. So you're educating the people watching and listening, and I want you to share what is in place to assist these seniors. What can they do? What exists and what mechanisms to freeze their taxes so they won't go through that, experience that. Many folks don't know about that, and I want you to explain what I'm talking about. And then, what when that does happen in terms of as they are aging in place, what is the ABC thing that they could possibly do to try to maintain the home as well as those taxes to be adjusted?
So this is something that people are trying to figure out, but I have not seen the really successful effort. Some of the work I was doing in New Orleans was around creating a cap within the city of New Orleans so that people who had lived in their house for 20 years, instead, because when neighborhoods do change, prices change, right? And what we were trying to do is to not force people out of a neighborhood when all of a sudden prices went up. We were trying to create a tax cap that would say if you lived in your house for 20 years or more, there is a restriction on how much your taxes can go up every year, regardless of whether the value around you is going up. The idea behind it was we don't want to use taxes as a reason to price people out. Mm-hmm. We also don't want to demand that people can't sell their house or tell them that they have to sell their house. We want them to gain equity when that happens so that if they choose to sell, they actually capture more of the value than they would if they were in a distressed situation where I can't afford the $5,000 for my house. So I'm going to sell my house for $7,000, pay the taxes and pocket $2,000 and keep it moving. That's often what happens in communities that all of a sudden have had a huge increase in value, but the neighborhood, has still got a lot of people who can't really afford that uplift in taxes. We wanted to make sure that there was a way for people who live there to capture that value. That's a hard thing to do because it requires not only approval at the city level, it requires approval at the state level, right? Because those taxes are mixed, and they're mixed often between municipality, the school district, sometimes there's a library, there's a whole bunch of other taxing components that you have to work with in order to execute something like that. I still believe that that's probably the direction that we need to figure out a solution for.
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want to tell people they can't sell, because you want to give them the opportunity to do so. You just don't want them to be so desperate to sell that they don't get to take advantage of any of the value, right? Um, and you want people who don't want to sell, and there's a lot of people who don't, right? I'm originally from Detroit, and my grandparents lived on the east side of Detroit, and in the neighborhood where they lived, there's like one or two houses that are standing. But those people have been living there for 40 years and they don't want to move. Yes, there's no other houses around. It's now become prairie and forest again. In some cases, it may feel to other people that it's, because it's so desolate, it doesn't feel comfortable. But those people have lived in that house since 1948, right? And they have no intention of moving. And you need to respect that too. So you got to find a balance between um, what you're looking to do to redevelop neighborhoods. How do you help people who want to stay in their homes? Change is coming for everybody, right? So the concept that you can actually create the system where, neighborhoods get better, but people don't ever get priced out, that's not realistic, right? But we don't have to make the increase in prices punitive to the legacy residents, the people who stayed when the city was going in a different direction. You don't have to make that process, punishing to them. We can find ways of helping them create value, where in other cases people have just disregarded it and allowed people to be moved out. That's a complicated. I probably said a whole lot there, but that's the spirit in which we try to approach how we think about development broadly with the Southland Development Authority, and how I think about it philosophically.
And again, this is a good conversation, and you're giving a lot of knowledge that people may not know. And in terms of what we were saying, aging in place, the mechanism I was speaking of is the exemptions. Rashanah may live next to Jane Doe, same comparables. We're not paying the same taxes because she's 70 and I'm 40. And
Right.
People need to understand, homeowners, that these are exemptions so that you can free, especially seniors, where you can you get the senior freeze, the senior I think seniors get like 3 different
No,
tax.
there are a number of exemptions that exist right now in Cook County for seniors. And those are attempts to address explicitly the aspect of what I'm describing.
Yep.
But let me not, I was going to say, here's the problem. I don't want to call it a problem, right? The issue that those exemptions don't address is what happens when I sell, right? So one fundamental thing that everyone needs to understand about money is that something is only worth what someone's willing to pay you for it, and the value, and you only make money when you sell, right? And for most, particularly people of color, we're very hesitant to sell assets, largely because throughout the history of this country, the sale of those assets has been used as a bludgeon to take advantage of us, right? So there's a philosophical process of thinking, I don't want to sell. I own this thing. I don't want to sell it because I'm probably not going to get full value for it. But the truth is you don't make money until you sell. And so the question that we have to solve, that the exemptions that you're referring to don't fully resolve, is how do I stay in this place as long as I want to affordably, but how do I maximize the value of this place when it's time to sell? And if I buy a house from a person who's had exemptions, I don't get to keep those exemptions. So all of a sudden, the value of that house to me isn't the same as it is to that person with the exemptions, and therein lies the problem, right? So it's fine if you stay, but the moment that you decide to leave and you want to change ownership or any of those other things, the exemptions that currently exist don't fully reflect that value, and that causes an issue. Listen, it's better to have attempted to address this issue than to have ignored it altogether, but we haven't found a solution that I'm aware of anywhere in the country that has the right balance between how do I keep people here that want to stay here, and how do I make sure that when people do sell, that they maximize their value.
Yep, I agree. I know it's also the appeals too, because I was thinking about, as these new homes are being built, like I don't want to get priced out, but I can also appeal my taxes too in the event that it goes up. It's an ongoing conversation, but I think people knowing that exemptions exist. Again, you'll be shocked that many of our own,
Don't know.
folks
Yeah.
don't know. And every year, at least once a year, I'm taking a friend or a family member to go do the certificates of error because they didn't do their homestead exemption. They didn't know about it. They didn't know that the senior freeze has to be done every year and that it's income based. I believe in Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
65,000 and under. Um, and then not even knowing that it's programs to the point of like, the roof or the falling porch, that you have to be resilient and looking for that knowledge, that
Yeah.
information to see what programs are available from some government entities that may get government money to help, homeowners, repair. So wealth of knowledge out there that we just have to be willing to seek. I want to know what other opportunities, whether I'm a business owner, a developer, homeowner, investor, what kind of opportunities exist to be, in with work with SDA.
The Southland Development Authority.
Uh-huh.
Great question. So, a little bit of a commercial, but relevant to the question. We are hosting something called the Achieve Summit, which is June 27th to 29th. So it's 2 weeks from now, and it's in Tinley Park in the South Suburbs. And the intent behind this is a conference to actually help people who want to either buy or sell property or buy or sell businesses. And I really want to impress, particularly for the Gen Z, right, or the millennials that may be listening to your show. Don't think just because you're 18 or 25 that you can't buy a business, right? Age isn't the restriction for a business at all. And there are people who own laundromats, dry cleaners, uh, car washes, fast food locations that are, you know, baby boomers and older, looking to retire, need someone to buy their business. And there's a whole series of not just programs, but knowledge that help you identify those businesses, get in front of those people to make offers and buy those businesses. There are programs like the SBA 7A loan that allows you to buy a business. There's down payment assistance of sorts for people who want to buy companies. They're investors. There's a variety of resources that are out there. And a lot of times people take themselves out of the running because they think to themselves, well, I don't have any money and I'm young or I don't have a lot of knowledge. All of those things make it harder, but they're not impossible as a result. And the point of the conference that we're going to be hosting is to help introduce people to those sorts of opportunities that exist and help them get to a place where they understand and believe that they can actually do this. They can buy a property that maybe they don't live in, but they rent. They can buy a business that they own and don't operate. They're not the primary operator, they're the owner of that business. And so we've got Daymond John of ABC Shark Tank and founder of FUBU, who's going to be coming to speak. We've got Nelly Galan, who was one of the she was the very first employee of Telemundo and ran all of Telemundo. She's produced over 750 individual TV episodes in her lifetime, but she's now become a real estate tycoon, where she now has got this whole presentation around for women: don't buy shoes, buy books. I mean, buy buildings, right? And the point of this is that there's a day of inspiration where you're going to hear from people and they're going to tell you their story of how they went from buying businesses and buying real estate. And then on Sunday, we have a whole series of workshops where you actually can get hands-on experience and directly work with banks like Midland Bank and Huntington Bank, who are sponsors, work with Chicago Community Loan Fund and IFF, work with individual entrepreneurs, tax people, accounting people, work with folks, SomaCore, work with individual entities that can actually help you buy a business, buy real estate, and grow that business. And so what we do as an organization is we support those types of organizations. Like, so if you are a solopreneur, right, you've got your own business, you maybe generate $50,000 in revenue for yourself in your accounting practice. We have programs that work with people like you. You want to buy a business, we have programs for that too. Let's say you already own a business that does $20 million of revenue. It's a manufacturing business. We work explicitly with those types of businesses too. So from big to small, we have a variety of services, most of which are free, that we work with. Some of which you do have to pay for because often you get what you pay for. But we are invested in working with over 500 to 700 businesses and investors every single year to help grow the economy in the South Suburbs.
I mean, when you said Shark Tank, you had me there. I am a fan of the show and definitely a fan of Daymond John, the great work that he's been doing with FUBU, starting off and really encouraging entrepreneurs. Why is this moment important for the Southland region, this specific event that you're hosting? Because
Yeah,
typically we'll see this in the downtown Chicago area.
right.
We will see it even in the further Northland area of Illinois. Why is it important for the Southland to have this event?
That's a great question, and it is exactly the point, right? Funny enough, there's only one event that's taken place in the last 2 years that's kind of similar to this. And to your point, it took place in Schaumburg. And that's the Aspire event that took place last year, I think last October. Even downtown Chicago doesn't get the kind of star power that we're bringing to the South Suburbs. There are several reasons, but one of the most important reasons, and you experienced it on the bus tour, many people just don't know all the assets that exist in the South Suburbs. And until you see it for yourself, it doesn't become tangible that, hey, this is the area for growth. But when you pull off of I-57 on Harlem and you come around to the Tinley Park Convention Center, you're going to see a place that if you had gone opposite direction to Schaumburg, it's going to look just like Schaumburg to you. So you would come and think to yourself, why isn't this area as developed as Schaumburg? It has all the same assets. It has a convention center, has hotels. It looks beautiful. It comes off of multiple major highways, right? That traverse the entire country. And we intentionally are bringing it to the Southland because we want people to come and see the opportunity for growth is actually out here. And I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to show you. I'm going to physically put you in this place so you see it for yourself. And then you won't have any more questions. You can see the housing stock. You can see what the roads look like. You can see what the assets like the Tinley Park Convention Center and other things are. And we actually have train stations. You know, there are 30 train stations that let you off on the Metro into the South Suburbs that already exist. They don't have to build them. And as a result, you can get in and out of the South Suburbs without a car. So when you're starting to think about, I want to be in a place where there's more affordable housing, I want to have green space, I want to be able to live someplace without a car, I want to be in a place that is poised for growth, the South Suburbs meets all of those check marks. And we want to have this event there every year. So this is the first year, but we're already planning 2026. That'll be June 25th to 27th in 2026 to do the same thing and bring the same kind of caliber of people here to the event, because we also think that this is the population that tends to be more heavily women dominated, tends to be more women of color that are the ones that are going to be buying the businesses from the boomers. They're the ones that are going to be buying the real estate and actually making these investments. And so we want to center this event in the place where we think the highest possible growth exists. And we want to market to the community that we think actually has the biggest upside, has the biggest opportunity for growth. That's not to mention, I'm sorry, I will say this, we're in this very uncertain time, given what's happening in the country. And for many people, that level of uncertainty kind of stops you cold, stops you from taking whatever you may perceive to be a risk. But in contradiction, when you see this kind of level of uncertainty, the worst thing that you can do is stop moving, right? When there's this kind of uncertainty that exists, you actually have to pick a direction and you got to move. You got to make investments. You got to make plans. And one of the reasons that we want to do this right now is with this level of uncertainty, we need to inspire a lot of people today to become buyers of property, buyers of businesses. And we think the community that we're in is the solution to the way out, right? Helping this population of people buy businesses and real estate is the broader solution of what we need for growth, not only for the Southland and the Chicagoland area, but for the entire state of Illinois.
So if I'm a newbie to this business, whether it's a developer, investor, homeowner, you're saying this event is for me.
Absolutely. It's designed specifically for you, right? It's designed for you not to know anything and to come in and learn, to be inspired by other stories. There's 6 speakers that are going to speak on Saturday, tell you their individual stories, including mine, about how we developed our businesses and wealth. And then we have 9 workshops that actually give you the how-to of how to go out and do it yourself. And at the end of that conference, you'll actually have, as part of your portfolio, the Southland Development Authority, which you can reach to on a regular basis to continue your learning process of how you become an investor, how you become a developer, how you become a business owner.
And this is a 3-day event. What can you tell us the date again? And where do we go to buy tickets? Because I know this is a ticketed event.
It is a ticketed event, and it's not a cheap ticket, but it's a great investment. You go to achievesummit2025.com, achieve the whole word, ACHIEVE, summit, SUMMIT, dot, 2025.com. And you can buy tickets there. There are 3 levels of tickets. There's a basic ticket, so you can participate all day Saturday. There's a premium ticket that allows you to participate both Saturday and Sunday. And then there's a VIP ticket that allows you to participate Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and meet Daymond John, Nellie Galan, and all the speakers at a private meet and greet that takes place after their presentation. And the event will be at the Tinley Park Convention Center, which is off of Harlem and 183rd. It's from Friday, June 27th to Sunday, June 29th. So 2 weeks essentially from today. And we're really excited about people participating. There are still tickets available. The VIP tickets are selling out because a lot of people want to get a chance to meet and take pictures with the guests who are going to be speaking, but there are still a couple that are left. You can buy tickets on site, but it's better to go to achievesummit2025.com to buy your tickets right away.
I want to take a step back regarding, the uncertainty of the government with so many changes that's happening at the level in Washington, specifically, cutbacks with CDFIs. How has that impacted you all? And what are you all doing to pivot and still keep going forward, as you said, not to pause?
Yeah. We have, because of my experience in working in Newark at the beginning of the Great Recession back 2006, 2008, that time period, we kind of came in with a plan that the American Rescue Plan Act money, the ARPA money, we knew that was going to run out. And so when we started developing programs to save companies during ARPA, during the COVID time, we immediately put together a plan to transition off of that money. We thought we'd have another 1.5 years to do so, but we had already started that process 2 years ago. And so we've actually not been as impacted as other not-for-profits. We have been impacted. So we have a lot of grants that are at the federal level that we haven't had any grant money that was taken away. We have grant money that we were expecting to receive that's in limbo. And now we're just acting as though that money may never come. We had already started to transition. One of the things that we are doing differently is that we're generating our own revenue, right? And we intentionally were doing that to be self-sustaining anyway. We're just moving at that even faster. And what that means for us is that in addition to us as a service organization, a not-for-profit service organization that supports, municipalities, individual businesses, and individuals, we actually are becoming a development organization. So we have under contract 250 acres right now that we are looking to develop so that we'll make fees as a developer and ultimately sell that land. And we're looking to buy individual houses like the one that you visited on our bus tour that we physically own. We bought, we own, we redeveloped. And so we are actually investing our own money in the Southland ourselves. We put our money where our mouth is. Not only do we think this is the best investment, we are investing in it directly as an organization to make that point. And that actually provides us an opportunity to generate revenue that supports us so that we don't have to be completely reliant on funding that comes from philanthropic or government sources.
This has been a great conversation. I want you to leave us with some advice about Kemp. What advice would you give someone looking to start in the business? If you was to give ABC, me, Rashanah, millennial, got, a homeowner, but I want to develop or invest, how would I get started and move forward? What would be a basic starting point? Because, I get hesitant too. I'm like, I don't have any money. I have credit. Like what, how do I start? Where do I start?
So I'm going to give you one piece of advice that you might anticipate a little bit and another piece of advice that I think you might not anticipate. So the the one that you anticipate is this. Just commit to yourself that I'm going to spend 2 hours a week and I'm going to study. I'm going to watch other people's story of how they made money. I'm going to learn how people structure their companies. I'm going to learn how people maximize how they protect themselves from taxes. I'm going to learn how people buy companies, how people buy stock. Just think of it as class. 2 hours a week, commit to learning. And if you do that consistently over time, you're going to start to see patterns of what other people have done who are in a similar situation to you, and you'll start to find a path that works for you. But the second thing that you might not anticipate that, frankly, is going to be part of what I talk about at the Achieve Summit is most people say they want to be rich, but that's not what they really mean, right? What they really mean is they want to be financially secure. And financial security for most people is somewhere between an additional $500 to $2,000 a month of income. For most millennials, if separate from their paycheck, they got $500 tax-free every month that they could do with it whatever they want. They would be able to save enough for a vacation, save enough to put a down payment on a car or a house, pay off their student loans. It would change their life, just $500. And even for people that make $200,000 and $300,000 a year, $2,000 extra a month changes their life. Now, once you understand that financial security could actually come in the form of just $500 to $2,000, when you start doing all that studying, you start thinking differently about what is it that you need that's going to change your life. It's not that you got to hit it big and all of a sudden have a house that you sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars or a business. You might just need to make an extra $500 to $600 a month. And there may be many ways for you to get there. But once you wrap your mind around that's the bogey, that's the goal of where I have to be, you now have to actually start to deal with your fear, right? Because your fear is what drives you to not act. And we have a podcast that's launching in a week called The First Million is Always the Hardest. It's my podcast and the host. And what I'm talking about isn't just making money. It's the fears and unmet aspirations you had as a child that you keep with you today. They prevent you from spending that 2 hours to read up and learn, that prevent you from taking the risk of going to a seminar or coming to the Achieve Summit, that prevents you from putting down payment on a house that you don't live in. And the goal is to put you in a place where you separate fear from danger. You start to invest in yourself. You put yourself on a path and a process for prosperity, and you stop worrying about the money and you start worrying about the path. And the path will actually lead you to a place where you have control over your life. You start to be able to make your own choices about how you spend your time and money. And the money is a byproduct of that, not the other way around. A lot of people think, well, once I get rich, I'll be able to do what I want to do. It's the exact opposite. Once you learn how to do what you want to do, you will then get rich.
Bo, that's amazing. And I was going to ask, are you mentoring? Are you educating? Where could they learn more information? So tell us the name of the podcast again, and where would it be found?
So it's called The First Million is Always the Hardest. It's launching next week on Spotify and Apple.
So all major podcast outlets. Okay.
Be able to and one of the things we are doing from the conference is that we're going to be offering a mastermind session so that people can come after the conference, be in a like-minded community where we'll talk about these sorts of things and kind of, to your point, nitty-gritty for people. Hey, this is the thing you should spend your next 2 hours on. This is the book you might want to read in that 2 hours you're investing. This is the other podcast. This is the other YouTube show. This is the other, TikTok that you might want to view that will help educate you about some of these issues. So we're going to be intentionally creating a community of like-minded people who are trying to learn and put themselves on a path where they have control over their lives. And as a result of that control, put themselves in a place where they have financial security.
For individuals who want to learn more about SDA, where do they go to find this great organization and find you?
southlanddevelopment.org. Southland Development, all one word, .org.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Will you come back?
Absolutely, Rashanah. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here. Did a great job, too.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to Someone You Need to Know. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the podcast on all major platforms and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Rashanah B, for more inspiring stories. Until next time, keep shining, keep building, and keep making the world a better place, one story at a time.